Gin Blossoms were a staple of the 90s music scene. The band's history would be intertwined with luck, patience, and great tragedy. Today, let's explore whatever happened to the Gin Blossoms. Hailing from Tempe, Arizona, the LA Times would state the following about the band in a 1993 profile. Let's face it, Tempe, Arizona is not exactly a thriving rock and roll mecca. It seems more like one of those places that a budding rock band leaves, then later reminisces about for its boring but lovable qualities. Gin Blossoms were born and raised on REM, Tom Petty, Cheap Trick, and The Replacements, which offered a stark contrast to the other popular bands of the early 90s, who were fed a healthy diet of punk rock, metal, and groups like the Pixies. Gin Blossoms married joyful-sounding melodies with young adult anxieties. Hailing from Tempe, Arizona, Gin Blossoms first formed in 1987 thanks to a Tower record store in the city where frontman Robin Wilson and bassist Bill Lean both worked. Initially, the first lineup of the Gin Blossoms had guitarist Jesse Valenzuela as the lead vocalist before Robin Wilson took over. Back in the late 80s, it was pretty common for club owners to hire bands who played mostly covers. To satisfy club owners, Gin Blossoms would adopt the alter ego Del Monte's, whose plan it was to play cover tunes at clubs around the city and earn some money, while they would also be writing their own material. Soon enough, the sets that the Gin Blossoms were playing around the city of Tempe didn't stray too far from the Del Monte's. The Del Monte's would most notoriously play covers of television show theme songs, including the Jeffersons' Movin' On Up. By 1988, Gin Blossoms developed a name around town and became one of the hottest acts in the city. In both 1988 and 1989, the Phoenix New-Times newspaper named the band the Best of Phoenix. Soon enough, other press outlets outside of Tempe picked up on them, with the College Music Journal referring to them as, and I quote, the best unsigned band in America in 1989. The same year, the group would play a showcase at the South by Southwest Festival, and soon enough, they would put out their self-funded debut record, Dusted, the same year. The band soon started becoming regulars in Los Angeles, playing clubs including Raji's, Club Lingerie, and the Coconut Teaser. They would eventually attract the attention of A&M Records in 1990. While the band should have been celebrating their success, guitarist Doug Hopkins was not. Having suffered from severe depression at a young age, he was against signing with a major label, feeling pressure to deliver, and also feeling like someone else's property. His drinking would only escalate once the band signed a major recording contract. According to Rolling Stone magazine, Hopkins would frequently show up to gigs intoxicated, while band practices resulted in verbal screaming matches. The band would first convene in Los Angeles in 1991 to record their major label debut, but it was a complete disaster. The group spent close to $100,000 and had nothing to show for their work, and were almost dropped by their label. Frontman Robin Wilson would tell Rolling Stone, "We were a fragile mess. We were all treading water trying to make the record. We knew this was our last chance. It was an intense experience on every level," he'd remember. During a separate interview with Billboard magazine, Wilson would credit the band's label with helping turn things around, letting them release an EP titled Up and Crumbling, as well as touring a bit, revealing, "They gave us a chance to succeed or fail, to learn about the studio and toughen up." As the band attempted to take a second stab at their first LP for A&M Records, they chose a different producer and location. The band would move from LA to Memphis, and that's not to say that it was a perfect experience, because it was anything but. The band soon started running into problems with Hopkins, with Wilson telling the LA Times in 1996, "It's just a sad thing when you've got somebody you love and you're watching them destroy themselves before your eyes, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And it's all happening while you're making the most important record you've ever made in your life," he'd say. Wilson remembered one incident that showed how checked out Doug was, saying, "I came into the studio and Doug was there with John, and I heard John say, 'Well, someone is going to have to do these solos.' Doug said, 'I guess I'd rather Jesse do my solos.' I was just floored. I cannot believe that was something Doug was considering. I left the room and almost threw up." But there was one solo that Hopkins did play, and it was on one of the songs he wrote himself, the huge hit Hey Jealousy. Shortly after the recording of New Miserable Experience, the band would decide to fire Hopkins. His bandmates viewed him as too much of a liability. While Hopkins wrote or co-wrote half of the songs on New Miserable Experience, he didn't record a lot of his guitar parts on the album because, according to his bandmates, he would usually show up to the studio under the influence and couldn't even stand properly. According to a 1994 Rolling Stone article, Hopkins would be, and I quote, "doused in aftershave and mouthwash to cover the signs of a multi-day drinking binge." Hopkins was put on a plane to Arizona following his firing. After Hopkins' departure, the group would shrink to a quartet, with Wilson handling both guitar and vocal duties. But after a few rehearsals, the band decided they should get a fifth member, and they soon enlisted guitarist Scotty Johnson, who the members knew from another band in Tempe. To make matters worse, according to Rolling Stone, the band withheld $15,000 of Hopkins' royalty payments until he signed away half of his publishing. The guitarist reluctantly agreed since he needed the money, and half of the publishing he signed away would be transferred to his replacement. New Miserable Experience would be released in August of 1992, and it wasn't a big success initially. The band toured extensively behind the album, going on the road alongside Toad the Wet Sprocket, and the album within its first year of release only sold around 80,000 copies. Side note, guys, I've done a whole video on Toad the Wet Sprocket's career. The link is down below in the description box. Getting back to the story. Things would finally change for Gin Blossoms, as Wilson would tell the LA Times. Then the label and our manager got together and decided it was a much better record than that, and they came up with a strategy to relaunch the record with a new cover and a new video. It was basically just a matter of the label deciding that they wanted to make it a hit. Okay, we're really going to do it this time, he'd say. And surprisingly, Hey Jealousy wasn't a big hit when the single was released, and the label had to relaunch the single 3 times to get any traction. Wilson would tell Rolling Stone, "One day we got a call from the label that they were going to try Jealousy again and make another video for it. The budget for the first was $5,000, the second was $10,000, the third was $40,000. That's when I was like, holy shit, they're serious. At that point, we had been in the van for 6 months, just a blur of college cafeterias, interviews, and opening for whoever we can he'd remember. Then MTV did its magic and the song would explode. At the end of the day, Gin Blossoms would sell 4 million copies of New Miserable Experience and produce 2 massive hits with Hey Jealousy and Found Out About You, both of which would be top 40 hits. In addition to that, the album had 3 additional singles that charted, including Mrs. Rita, Until I Fall Away, and Allison Road. The timing seemed perfect because by the summer of 1993, music fans were being inundated with an onslaught of alternative rock artists, and their record label saw it as an opportunity, telling the LA Times, "Not all the young kids belong to that style of music or are represented by the angst of that message. There are other kids who see life a little bit simpler. It's not kids who don't see a future. The Gin Blossoms are a little more uplifting, and I think they strike a chord with those kids," they'd say. By October of 1993, New Miserable Experience was a huge hit, but Doug Hopkins felt betrayed. He even attended a Gin Blossoms gig and attacked Robin Wilson before being kicked out of the venue. And following his dismissal from the band, Hopkins went back to Tempe and played in a new band called the Chimeras. Once Hey Jealousy became a monster hit, Hopkins received a gold record for the song, but his former Chimeras bandmate Lawrence Zubia would recall to Rolling Stone that it only stayed up on his wall for about 2 weeks. Zubia would tell the magazine, "When Doug destroyed the gold record, it was the end. That was when the fear came to me." Almost 10 days later, on December 4th, 1993, Hopkins would enter a Phoenix hospital where he would do an initial consultation in an attempt to get sober. Following the consultation, Hopkins would head to a gun store to buy the very weapon that he would take his life with the following day. He would be found in his apartment at the young age of 32, and sadly, when he was found, he only had $500 in his pocket, which was all the money he had to his name. The same month he died, New Miserable Experience would move into the top 25 on the Billboard album charts. Robin Wilson would tell Forbes his reaction when he heard the tragic news. "I don't remember exactly when and where I was, but it was both shocking and also it wasn't surprising. Doug had been telling people for months and months that he was going to do this. We knew there was a chance. Actually, there were times back when he and I were friends that the subject of it came up. Doug always seemed to think he was going to die young, go out in a blaze of glory." According to People magazine, who published an article on the guitarist's death, they would write, "At his memorial service, the Blossoms were approached by a woman bearing what she said was a message from Hopkins. Did they remember when someone poured sugar into the gas tank of their tour van back in 1992? Well, the woman said, Hopkins had instructed her to tell them that he was the culprit. Hearing that at the funeral sort of made me feel good," said Wilson. "Doug was always good at getting the last laugh, that's for sure," he'd say. Several years after Hopkins' death, New Miserable Experience proved to still be a juggernaut, with Hey Jealousy still getting heavy play on rock radio and top 40 stations in America. One representative from the group's label, A&M, would tell Billboard magazine, and I quote, "It's a phenomenon. While many songs may find an ear with a radio audience, they usually get sick of hearing the same singles played again and again. But Hey Jealousy was different." One radio programmer who worked at Z100 would tell Billboard in 1994, "The song has no burn factor." The station had tested the song every week for a year and a half and had never received any negative feedback. Even Kevin Weatherly, who's portrayed as Pig Vomit in Howard Stern's Private Parts movie, would manage K-Rock in Los Angeles during the 90s, and would admit to Billboard magazine, "We can't get rid of it. 6 months later, it's still part of our regular rotation," speaking about Hey Jealousy. While New Miserable Experience was successful stateside, it wasn't a massive hit overseas, largely because Gin Blossoms never nurtured that market. The band's manager Marty Wiggins would tell Billboard, "By the time the first record broke, the band was so effing burnt. The concept of going overseas seemed morbid to them," he'd say. Years later, fans would see the type of songwriting the band was capable of following the death of Hopkins when they were asked by their label to record a single for the 1995 film Empire Records. Valenzuela and Wilson would team up with outside songwriter Marshall Crenshaw to write the ballad Till I Hear It From You. The song was pieced together very quickly, and its popularity would even eclipse that of the movie it was written for. Till I Hear It From You would peak at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, and the success of the single had the label excited for the band's follow-up album, but of course it also created an enormous amount of pressure on Gin Blossoms. The group was reportedly told by their management and their label not to include the single on their third album, so it would be a pure record. They also didn't want to include the song on the album because they were concerned that people would think the surviving members of Gin Blossoms needed outside songwriters following the death of Hopkins. The album's producer John Hampton would claim another reason why the label didn't want the song on their upcoming record because it would negatively impact the sales of the Empire Records soundtrack. Regardless of all the back and forth, the song would end up on their third album. Heading into their follow-up album, Robin Wilson would reveal where the band's head was at the time, saying, "We knew that we could write songs. We weren't worried about that. It's not our responsibility to live up to Doug's songwriting," he'd say. The group's third studio album, appropriately titled Congratulations, I'm Sorry, would be released in February of 1996. The album's title came from those who congratulated the band on their success, while also expressing sadness over the loss of guitarist and songwriter Doug Hopkins. The album's producer John Hampton would tell the Memphis Flyer that the band was under a tremendous amount of stress to deliver, revealing, "Now we were expected to equal or beat the songs from the first album, but if one takes an artist and puts them on the road for a 15-month tour and then shortly thereafter for another larger 15-month tour, and you add to the fact that all of the money coming in kind of relaxes the old anxiety of youth, you now have a major song problem." So the band starts down the path of record 2 with some good songs, but not quite the songs of youth, he'd say. Frontman Robin Wilson would tell the Phoenix New-Times how he turned to American pop rock music to influence his songwriting on the group's third album, revealing, "When I really started to concentrate and focus on my own songwriting style, I listened to Tom Petty and Cheap Trick and the Replacements. I think it was because they were singing about real things. They weren't singing about the Antichrist and nuclear war and these kinds of things. They were singing about real stuff that I could directly relate to. It would be that type of songwriting that permeated on the band's third album." Congratulations, I'm Sorry would produce several big singles, including Follow You Down, which was a top 10 hit on the pop charts, in addition to Day Job and As Long As It Matters, which also charted. Once the album came out in February of 1996, the label had one goal in mind, and that was to have long-term sustainability with the singles, just like New Miserable Experience did. For indie retailers, the label planned on doing 6 months of a postcard stuffing campaign with kitchen magnets, lighters, and stickers with the band's name on it. These items would be included with the purchase of any music from these retailers. The other part of the label's campaign was to see the band play college campuses ahead of spring break, so by the time the students went home, they would tell their friends about the new Gin Blossoms record. Despite the label's effort, Congratulations, I'm Sorry would only sell 1 million copies, about a quarter of what its predecessor did. Guitarist Jesse Valenzuela would tell the Phoenix New-Times, "I think the first record is the postcard of the band. I think Congratulations, I'm Sorry did pretty well considering we didn't have Doug Hopkins anymore. We didn't have everything that we had in the initial presentation. I think it's done okay. It's not something that would have kept me up at night," he'd say. By 1997, the band would take a hiatus so its members could pursue other musical projects. Robin Wilson started the group Gas Giants, while Valenzuela formed the Low Watts. 4 years later, the band would reunite in 2001 and stay together till this very day. While their lineup would remain mostly intact, they've had a revolving lineup of drummers, starting with Philip Rhodes, who suffered from the same addiction Hopkins did but was given a second chance, but was eventually booted from the band. Since their reunion, Gin Blossoms have put out several new albums, including 2006's Major Lodge Victory, 2010's No Chocolate Cake, and 2018's Mixed Reality. The band has been a staple of the 90s touring circuit over the past decade, teaming up with bands including Lit, Marcy Playground, Sugar Ray, and Everclear. It's been almost 3 decades since Hopkins' death, So how did the band members feel about him now? Well, Valenzuela would tell the Houston Press, that was a time before people had conversations about mental health issues and depression and bipolar issues, and we as a band were young and ill-equipped to handle that. He just couldn't keep going like he was. If I had the knowledge I do now, I would have done everything completely different with Doug, but we don't have that privilege, he'd say. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.